on World Press Freedom Day, which falls on May 3 of each year. Yemeni journalists continue to face restrictions and grave human rights abuses, especially in healthy controlled areas. The following report has more details.
On World Press Freedom Day, Yemeni writers, intellectuals, and journalists recall the history of the Yemeni press and the reality of freedoms that come with the dawn of the press since the 50s of the late century, as the press did not witness any outlet for freedoms except with the arrival of President Ali Abdullah Saleh to power in the year 1978. Newspapers such as Al-Amal and Al-Sahwa had been expressing freedom of speech, and that continued as an outlet for freedom of press and the Yemeni media for 3 decades, until it turned to worse than it was in the 50s, after the events of February 11, when the Houthis stormed the capital Sana'a.
In the era of Ali Abdullah Saleh, journalists practiced their jobs freely. Now we have no freedom of expression. Journalists are arrested and killed. They get no salaries and have no freedom. Since 2011, journalists have had no rights.
Since the militia took control of the capital Sana'a, it has launched campaigns of arrests against all journalists, closed and confiscated dozens of media institutions, and many of the journalists have been killed, arrested, forcibly disappeared, and tortured in all its forms for years.
We live in a painful reality. Houthis arrest journalists and torture them. 4 journalists a week ago came out of prison. They were extremely sick.
As a result of years of war, journalists in Yemen were subjected to campaigns of incitement that made them vulnerable to violations. During the first quarter of this year, the Journalist Syndicate monitored 20 cases of violations of media freedoms from January 1 to March 30, 2023, which includes torture, stopping salaries, physical assaults, threats, and confiscations of belongings. On the World Press Freedom Day, Yemen has become one of the worst environments for journalistic work in the region, in the absence of freedom of expression and the exposure of journalists to violations, constant harassment, and not being allowed to practice their activities freely.